Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the Lashing Out Podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. My name is Jarrod Prugar, and I am joined by my good friend and co-host, Kevin Quigley. Kevin, Penn State beat Boise State. It wasn't a great win. It wasn't pretty, although it turned into being pretty, solely because they won. They survive an advanced season. They are in the Final Four. There are two other teams that have made it that far, with Ohio State, which we both predicted. You, though, went the opposite solely for content and to go against me, because what else would a good co-host do? And then Texas also beat Arizona State. Oh, now, Ohio State blew the absolute doors off of Oregon for the better part of the game. And Penn State outlasted Boise State. Both teams didn't play a characteristically good game. And we'll talk about that later in the show. But so far, so good for Penn State. They're still playing, and they're going to South Beach.
Yeah, and we're going to be joining them. Just exciting 2 days of college football. Kind of feels weird to be doing a post-game show on a Wednesday night. Unfortunately, we don't have the result of the Sugar Bowl yet. The tragic act of violence that happened in New Orleans about 3 a.m. this morning caused the Sugar Bowl to be delayed, and rightfully so. Our hearts and prayers and thoughts and whatever else you believe in goes out to the 15 people who perished and all who else who are injured there. So that game's going to be played tomorrow. So Penn State is going to have to wait until probably about 7:30 tomorrow night to figure out who they're playing. But the good news is they know their destination. They got home this morning. James Franklin called into College game day from the tarmac, and they probably left Scottsdale about 9:30 Eastern, 10 o'clock Eastern this morning. Got back to State College. All is well and good there. They're resting. They got to watch an entertaining day of college football as their rest day. And then tomorrow, when they should be going to work to prepare for their next opponent, they're actually going to be watching their next opponent play live from New Orleans. So bit of a weird dynamic. There's obviously some circumstances as to why this is how it has to be. But the college football playoff games today were entertaining, and I really like the way this 12-team bracket's shaping out to be.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for me is the Texas-Arizona State game was very weird, because it had every making of being an absolute blowout for Texas. But Arizona State fought and clawed back, and Texas didn't do a great job of getting themselves in a position to put them away. Much like Penn State. Penn State, they're a fumble away. The Drew Aller fumble puts that game away, puts it probably 21-0. And it's a completely different outcome, in my opinion. But that's why the games play out. And it was a good day of football. You know, Ohio State, obviously, like we talked about in the pregame show, really they were expected that it's hard to beat a team twice. And then obviously, like, you make those plays the way that they did, and they played so well. Jeremiah Smith was an absolute stud. And he went out for, I think, 187 and 2 touchdowns or something like that. He had 2 touchdowns early. Just absolute great football game by him. Will Howard played a great game. And Ohio State survives in advance. And, you know, Oregon started to claw back there at the end of the second quarter. And then in the first part of the second half. But, man, Ohio State did everything they needed to do. Penn State did everything they needed to do. And that's why they're going to play.
Yeah, and then I think the other thing to look at is just how hard it is to win in college football. Texas coming off a historic win against Clemson, just beat the doors off of them. And then they go to Arizona State. They go to the Peach Bowl to play Arizona State, come out real hot, 2 touchdowns in 3 plays, and all of a sudden they need 2 overtimes and an interception in overtime to put them away. So can't take for granted this is now James Franklin's second top 10 win in a row. Probably something that he's never been able to say is SMU was ranked 10. Boise State was ranked 9th in the country. Penn State's ranked 4th. So, yes, they were favored in both of those games, but a top 10 ranked win nonetheless. And I don't think there's anything to slouch at. And, you know, that game had some big game James vibes to it. in the third and fourth quarters. But all that matters is they win 31-14, and like you said, to South Beach they go.
And I think the one thing that I'm happy with the Oregon thing, it sucks to see a team get blown out because I think Oregon's a really good football team. And we're going to talk about the buys later. Or actually, let's talk about them now because 3 of the 4 teams that have played so far, the teams that had the buys, lost. And we talked about this when Penn State was playing for the conference championship, where we said it wasn't good for them to win the conference championship. As weird as that seems, because they don't get to play for 3 weeks. Boise State off for 3 weeks. Oregon off for 3 weeks. Arizona State off for 3 weeks. And you can't replicate the intensity of a game that nobody has really played in. Listen, Penn State's been to Fiesta Bowls. You know how to the logistics of it, but there has never been a set of games with more on the line at this stage of the game, and I think that's a huge factor, and that was one of the biggest because you could tell that Boise State was a little rusty. You could tell that Arizona State was a little rusty, and I don't know if it was just Ohio State played that so damn good, or if it was Oregon being rusty too, and it was probably a mixture, but the buys had a big impact. And for that, I mean, there are going to be changes, I think, to next year's playoff situation. And I think there has to be. I think it's an imperfect system. The seeding is the seeding. The other thing I'm glad is Oregon's #1 seed overall, and they lost. They got bounced. So they were rewarded for with the conference championship for beating Penn State. I do think Penn State exposed their defense a little bit, much to the benefit of Ohio State on Wednesday night. But again, that's why you play the game. And did Boise State deserve their 4th seed? Yes, 100%. Or Arizona State, I'm sorry, deserve it. Yes. Boise State, yes. They did everything they needed to do based on the qualifications. And listen, they put up good fights. And we'll talk about Boise State in the second segment. But Arizona State proved they can play with the big dogs.
Yeah, and the one thing that you can kind of, like you said, you can't match intensity. The other thing you can't match 100% is speed. And all 3 teams that went out who had played 10 days ago, Penn State, Texas, and Ohio State, their speed smacked their opponents in the mouth. Penn State goes up 14 points after 2 drives. Texas goes up 14 points after 3 plays. Ohio State they take the opening kick, 3 plays, 75 yards in a minute off the clock. Just a dominant. Oregon just completely lost.
The time of possession in that game was absurd for Arizona State. Sorry to cut you off, but I watched the command center for that game. I thought it was a different look, and I love it. I very much enjoyed it, getting to see the stats and everything. And time of possession was on there, and the time of possession was just absolutely staggering.
Yeah, and then in Ohio State, they go up 14-0 with 2 quick drives as well, including that lightning fast first drive. So, yeah, there's something to be said about playing an opponent that played 10 days ago and you haven't played in 3 weeks. And we saw it with Penn State against Washington when DeJuan Williams comes in at quarterback and his speed just took them by surprise. SMU, Kevin Jennings, their offense had some success the first drive of the game. I think they went 46 yards, 49 yards, whatever it was. But then Penn State's defense locked them down because Penn State was coming off of that layoff. SMU had a similar one, but the speed is what it takes. You can watch film all day long. We can watch it from end zone cams, press box cams, whatever. But you and I have both been on the field in game. The speed difference on the field when you're there, when you're hearing the collisions, when you're hearing their feet, looking at the turf at how much they tear it up in the trenches, that does not translate. That does not translate through film. It doesn't translate. You don't get that perspective of speed until you actually see them run by you. And I think there's something to be said about having to play that first round.
Absolutely. And, people talk about Penn State's seed and how they get an easy trip to the semis. And listen, the game against SMU was not easy. And again, we're going to talk a little bit more about Boise State here, but listen, it's the same deal for everybody. Texas was right up there, just like Georgia was, and they couldn't beat Georgia. And then they end up in the playing in the first round, and that paid off. But you can't replicate the speed and intensity of the contest at practice, even going ones versus ones. And that's what we saw there, and it's very tough to handle that. And now, for the benefit of the teams that are continuing to play, they are still continuing to play. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what how Penn State got to do that when we come back from this break on the Lashing Out Podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. Welcome back to the second segment of the Lashing Out Podcast on Nittany Sports Now Network. He's Kevin. I'm Jarrod. Kevin, Penn State lives to play in the Orange Bowl. By beating Boise State, it was a lot closer than the score I think it indicated. For a lot of different reasons on both sides. Penn State really thwarted what Ashton Jeanty was able to do. Man, I haven't seen Penn State tackle like that in a long time. He averaged 3.5 yards a carry. He did manage to get over 100. Still wasn't able to get the record, and his longest run was 26 yards. You and I both said if they can control that, Penn State's going to win. And honestly, they were in position to do that throughout the game. But Maddox Madsen, man, he played an incredible game outside of, the three picks that were costly.
Yeah, and that was Penn State's best tackling game. I think we said also going in is you need to hit Ashton Jeanty and you need to wrap him up. The problem with wrapping up tackles is that it leaves your shoulders susceptible. It leaves your arms susceptible. And unfortunately, Penn State lost 2 key defenders to arm injuries, Abdul Carter and Jalen Reed. We don't know the status of either of those. Hoping it's just, I don't want to call it a shoulder separation or like a mild dislocation, but hopefully it's something that it can recover in 8 days, because they do have to play a week from tonight. And if Abdul and Jalen Reed can't go, that's a completely different defense. I think the back end really stepped up. There's 3 fourth quarter interceptions. Zaki Wheatley, I think had an absolutely fantastic game, but you can tell that the point of emphasis this week in practice was wrapping up on tackles, because a lot of the season it's been a lot of shoulder shivers, arm shivers, trying to just knock people over. And I think Ashton Jeanty had their attention, rightfully so, and they made a point of emphasis, and they succeeded in their point of emphasis, which I think is key. And then the other thing that you and I said is, if Maddox Madsen beats you, like, you got to tip your cap to him. And he didn't beat him, but 23 of 35, 304 yards. He did his hardest. He did his damnedest. And, you got to tip your hat to him. They challenged, Penn State's defense challenged him to step up. I think Boise State's offensive coordinator, Dirk Cutter, had a really good game plan. He saw that Penn State, I don't know if he saw it, or predicted it, probably both, that Penn State was going to sell out to stop the run. Penn State's linebackers were crashing. Kobe King, Tony Rojas, Dom DeLuca, they were all downhill from the start, trying to break through the offensive line. And what does that leave? That leaves a void in the defense 5 to 7 yards behind the line of scrimmage. And what did they do all night long? The 5 to 7 yard quick passes, because if you're selling out to stop the run and they end up passing, well, those guys just become blitzers. Like, it just becomes an unplanned blitz every time, because if you're on your toes falling towards the line of scrimmage, you're not going to be able to drop back into your zone effectively. So you kind of get caught in no man's land. So if you can go out in the 5 to 7 yard hot routes, right behind where the linebackers are either blitzing or crashing the run, you're going to have a lot of success. And that's probably something Penn State should do next week against Georgia or Notre Dame, whoever they should play, because honestly, it worked. The way Penn State shut down Ashton Jeanty is the way that other defenses have played Penn State all year long, and they've not gone to that intermediate passing scheme.
And listen, the biggest play for them all game was just the tight end leak. They bought the play fake, and Matt Lauder, the tight end, was wide open. He averaged 24 yards a reception. His longest was 53 yards. Penn State gave up some serious yards, and we said that was okay. Like, them giving up yards is going to happen, but it's not about the yards. It's about the points. And, Boise State goes down on the first drive of the game. I thought it's 4th and 2, and you don't go to your bell cow. Ashton Genty is the best running back in the country. Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton are the best running back duo, in my opinion. But Genty, I think, is definitely just the way that he ran, like his motor, even like those were 104 earned yards, and 104 of the he had 104 of the 108 total for Boise State. But they go down and it's 4th and 2, and they elect to kick the field goal rather than go for it with Genty. It's kind of the opposite of SMU, where Rhett Lashley goes for it, doesn't get it. With the Mustangs. And Penn State turns around and drives down the field and scores. And then they score again. And then they hit a little bit of a lull. Boise State settled in. But the biggest thing, Drew Aller, statistically 13 to 25, 171 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. That's the biggest thing. They did have one key fumble. They were up 14-0. Zachy Wheatley had just had just recovered a Kobe King forced fumble against Genty. Next play, Penn State fumbles at the mesh, and the tide flips. If they get that, they go 21. They go up 21-0 in the first quarter. It's a completely different outcome. And we're probably talking a little bit more about how Penn State blew the doors off of Boise State rather than, what we're talking about now. But Boise State had a lot of opportunities to find the scoreboard. They just didn't come through when they needed to.
Yeah, I actually had a friend text me at 14-0. Like, I'm flipping the channel. Like, this thing's over. There's no reason to watch the rest of this. And I was like, I don't know. Like, then the Drew
There's
Aller,
a lot of time left.
There was a lot of time left. And yeah, the Drew Aller fumble. I think last night the Penn State offense, they had a lot of doing too much isms to them. Drew shouldn't have kept that ball. That should have been a clear Nick Singleton handoff. Drew tries to pull it really, really late. You've got an outside linebacker waiting and a DN who was frozen in his tracks. Like, if Drew doesn't lose that fumble, it's going for a 3-yard loss anyways. Nick Singleton might just get to the line of scrimmage, what have you, but you live to fight another day. So kind of a bad decision there. And then kind of what I was talking about the defense is, and something I've said the last couple of weeks is, they kind of listened to me this week, and not in a good way, is don't perceive your opponent's strengths as something that you can't challenge. Well, they challenged Boise State's weakness, which was the deep pass game. I don't know why Boise State they had a formidable run defense. I think Penn State only averaged like 2 yards a carry in the second quarter, and in the third quarter, 0.7 yards per carry on 11 attempts in the second quarter. And then on 21 attempts, they averaged 3.7 in the third quarter. So Boise State was very successful in stopping the run in the middle part of that game. But I just didn't like the downfield passing attack that they've not shown all year long. It felt like, you do 3 or 4 of those a game, that's fine. But it seemed like once a drive they were trying it, once every set of downs they were trying it. And that's why Drew's completion percentage was so low, 13 to 25. I'm willing to bet 10 to 12 of those are just downfield forced throws, and nothing got intercepted. But if it wasn't for a missed Omari Evans OPI, like, Omari Evans broke up that interception by committing the pass interference that luckily wasn't called. I think it got made up later in the game because Omari Evans had a DPI against him and it didn't get called. So it kind of all evened out in the wash. But yeah, I think Kotelnicki wanted to show the offense in a different light after the first couple of drives. Boise State had gotten accustomed to the run. So yeah, you needed to open it up a little bit, but the third down and 1 foot got me. You go for the little drag route and then the little corner route. It wasn't even like to the corner. It was only like a 10 or 15 yards downfield. I don't understand why on 3rd and 1 foot you make that play call. That kind of took the wind out of the sail, and them trying all those things on offense. Sure, they thought they had the game under wraps. and Andy Kotelnicki probably understood that, okay, like eventually we can abandon this and then pull away if we need to. That's exactly what happened. But I don't know. It was he tried too hard, and that trying too hard, trying to force the ball downfield when you weren't being successful, that was bringing back big game James vibes. And I was not in a good place mentally in the third and fourth quarter until they broke it open.
It was really weird. I thought they did try to get too cute. Obviously, the trick play on third down didn't work out either. You know, there are just a lot of things. It reminded me of a very much an early season game where you knew you were better than the other team. They could have probably embarrassed Boise State. The deep ball was there, and Drew Adler made some great throws. Oh, but don't get me wrong, he made some great throws. Sometimes they just don't always fall. But his touchdown passes were just absolute masterpieces. But again, Penn State was in a position where they weren't in danger, and they really weren't in danger ever, despite how the score might have looked. I didn't think that Boise State was ever going to really come back into it. They had their chances. But again, Penn State just absolutely executed Ashton Jeanty. And I saw a lot of discourse about Jeanty and the Heisman. Listen, Jeanty still got 104 yards on 30 carries against a stout Penn State defense. Yeah, they got 412 yards. Maddox Matson had 300 and some odd yards throwing the football. They needed him to do that. They spread the ball around. Penn State gave up a couple of big plays, but they shot themselves in the foot so hard, so many times. And Boise State did it harder. They had the hands to the face was brutal on the touchdown throw for Madsen. That could have changed the complexity of the game. Then that turns around and ends up for points for Penn State on their next drive. But the ultimate thing is Penn State won the game. They are now playing in the Orange Bowl, and they're one of 4 teams after Thursday night's games that are still playing.
Yeah, and I think also you have to look at total plays. Boise State ran 75, Penn State only ran 66. And then Boise State had nearly 8 more minutes time of possession. Time of possession was 34:04 to 25:56. Boise State kind of had their way with Penn State's defense, and then the offense was going 3 and out. There was a time where I think Boise State had the ball for 11 out of 12 minutes in the third into the fourth quarter, and you could tell Penn State's defense was getting gassed. And Ashton Jeanty is kind of like the Derrick Henry type. Like Derrick Henry doesn't get a lot of yards in the first and second quarter. Become middle to late third quarter and into the fourth quarter, you're going to be tired of tackling that guy. And I think Boise State was able to take advantage of that. That 26-yard run on 3rd and 21 was a backbreaker. But again, it didn't lead to points. So, Boise State outgained them 412 to 387. Like, it was Boise State's game, and Penn State was still able to win by 17 points just because they got out to such a fast start. And you're right. If Drew doesn't fumble that, like, you're looking at 21-0, 3 drives in, and we're not even to the end of the first quarter. Like, that could have been an all-time route. That could have been an Ohio State-Oregon game.
You have all the momentum. You just forced Ashton Jeanty to fumble. He fumbled twice in that game. He fumbled twice the entire year coming into that game. But again, kudos to Boise State. I know that I am a Boise State fan, and I mean no bias by it, but they deserve to be there. They played their hearts out, and they showed that they can ball, that they can ball with the big dogs. And they did it in a very different way than Arizona State did. Arizona State's confidence was more so a cockiness and an arrogance a lot of times versus where the Boise State
brought their lunch
confidence was ready to go. Yeah, they came ready to ball. And they were humble. They did not say we're the better team. They battled it out on the field, and they came up short. They're probably 3 or 4 mistakes away from, again, a completely different game, much like Penn State is. So, kudos to both teams. But for us, it means another week of football, the college football semifinal. We're going to talk about a little bit more previewing semifinals week when we come back for the third and final segment of the Lasching Out Podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. Welcome back to the third and final segment of the Lasching Out Podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. I'm Jarrod and Kevin. Kevin, good news for both of us. The Orange Bowl is coming. I'm a credential approval away from flying down with you, of course. I'm coming to Richmond. I'm gonna get to watch you on your golf simulator since I'm not allowed to play it because I'm wrong-handed. Go to Miami for a nice quick trip and back on Friday and back at it. And this is again, we talked about the logistics of everything a multitude of times. The logistics of things have gotten hairier for, let's say, Notre Dame and whoever wins the Sugar Bowl. Now they have one less day. They moved the game up from 8:45 to 4, which is crazy to me, but it makes sense because they need to get help. They need to get, obviously there are more important things in football, and I think today obviously shows that. But again, for everybody there, Penn State is in the semifinals. The other matchup is Texas and Ohio State, and that's going to be a pseudo home game for Texas. That's at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas Stadium, a stadium you're not unfamiliar with by any means, Jerry World. So it will be at least a meaningful game in January, played in Jerry World. Of course, enter the Cowboys jokes as I have my Cowboys apparel on for the podcast. But yeah,
I had one loading up, so it's a good thing you said something.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and burn myself. Thanks. And like we said in the preview, Ohio State is a sleeping giant. They've got momentum. They steamrolled Tennessee. They steamrolled Oregon. They go into against the Texas Longhorns team that wasn't super impressive against Arizona State. They made some splash plays early, but the offense really kind of flattened out, and understandably so because they didn't have the ball often. But when they did have it, it wasn't really pretty.
No, and Ohio State is a pissed off football team. Yeah, we talked about beating the same team twice in the same season. That's a tough thing to do, but Ohio State came out as a pissed off football team. They've got a big chip on their shoulder because the last time they were out, the time before Tennessee, they were 20-point dogs, ended up losing to Michigan at home. The fan base is in turmoil. Ryan Day's head's on the line. Dave Portnoy's flying extend Ryan Day, go blue banners over the Tennessee game. And then Ohio State comes out and routes them. I think they were up 21-0 in a quick fashion against Tennessee as well. So on a similar amount of rest. So this is agnostic to rest Ohio State's quick starts. And I think that is something that any of the 5 teams currently left in the playoff, I'm a little worried about. If they can come out, punch me in the mouth, go up 14, 21 points, something in there, and then they go and play lights out defense like they did. I mean, they really didn't even have to care in the third and fourth quarter. I mean, Oregon comes out, takes the opening kick of the second half, goes for 7 on the drive. Pretty impressive drive, but long, grueling, kind of kept alive by penalties. In some key spots, really they have a long third down on that drive as well that they somehow miraculously completed. I was cooking dinner that time, so I wasn't terribly paying close attention to the game, but there were some weird things going on in that game, and everything went right for Oregon on that drive. Ohio State's a scary, scary football team. Of the 5 remaining, it's the one I would least like to play, and luckily for Penn State, they're on the other side of the draw. So
it would be absolutely incredible if Penn State and Ohio State end up, if things go well for Penn State in the semifinals and it's an all Big Ten college football championship.
Yeah, that would be cool. Go back to Notre Dame, Georgia. Obviously, yeah, we've talked the last couple of weeks, like the added logistical strain of the college football playoff. It weighs a lot on people's pockets, fans, everybody included. How many people had flights out of New Orleans today?
Right.
Hotel
rooms, obviously.
How many fans had a checkout this morning at 10 a.m. and they're scrambling to get that extended? Luckily, it's a day after New Year's. It's peak of winter. There's probably some availability there, but if you're flying a budget airline or maybe you got the hacker fare on Delta or United, whoever you're flying, like Maybe you can't change your tickets. So what's game attendance going to be like? Like, what are ticket prices for this game going to be? And how much money are the fans losing who had tickets and now have to sell them for $20 or $50, or they can't even get rid of them, and now they're out $300 or $400 for that. So luckily the game is moved up 4 hours for them. So they can probably get home by midnight, 1 o'clock, and then they're not terrible. But if I had to guess, both Notre Dame and Georgia scouting departments are already working on Penn State. They're not even caring about the
100%.
Like,
their analytics and their analysts have already been, and GAs have already been working on this. I mean, the game plan for this game has been installed for a while. Everybody knows what's going on. They're already advanced and ready to make something or figure something out for Penn State. And they were doing that advanced scouting as soon as the bracket came out. And you just added the film from this weekend or this week.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Like, they're already knee deep in the film from yesterday. Yeah. Can we talk? Go ahead. I'm going to change the subject. Go ahead.
Yeah, real quick. Penn State and Notre Dame haven't faced off since 2007. This is a matchup. They've played 19 times since 1913. Both teams have 9 wins, and there's a tie. And, in Central Pennsylvania especially, you're either a Pitt or you're a Penn State fan, a Notre Dame fan, fan of both, or you like Pitt. And this would be an insane matchup for everybody involved in Pennsylvania and throughout the country. Both alumni bases are vast, and it would probably be a best-case scenario for Miami. Notre Dame fans and Penn State fans aren't afraid to spend money to get to where they need to go. Now, Georgia and Penn State have faced off a little sooner, and we'll break all this down later this week as we preview everything. They've played each other twice, once back in 1983.
For the national title?
For national championship game. Yeah, right. In New Orleans. You'll figure. And then this is my first game ever. 2016 in the Tax Slayer Bowl. It was the first game I ever covered in person for Penn State. I've been on the beat in one way, shape, or form ever since.
And that was the end of the Mark Richt era, if I'm not mistaken. Is that true?
Yeah, Kirby Smart took over.
Yep. So, a lot of implications for tomorrow night. Keep your eyes peeled there. We've got to talk the rest of the bowls. Yes.
Yes.
The SEC.
We didn't even talk. Oh, yes.
Man, maybe the playoff committee, maybe the right 12 teams got in. Maybe Alabama didn't deserve to be in. Maybe South Carolina didn't deserve to be in. Both of those teams lost. 2 Big Ten teams, middle of the pack Big Ten teams. I think Illinois is
Michigan had a ton of guys opting out.
Yeah, Jalen Milroe turns it over 3 times. I think it's his second or third straight game of 3+ turnovers, which is a terrible look. Man, I was basking in the SEC misery yesterday. Absolutely, just lay it on me. I was SEC all day long. And then it was weird. Lane Kiffin on Twitter, did you see this?
He rooted for Penn State. He rooted for everybody.
All in on Penn State last night, which I could not tell if that was snark or not. But tough bowl season for the SEC.
But again, it is what it is. The biggest thing is the Big Ten teams, for the most part, are taking care of business. And the SEC teams are not. And Penn State has been very fortunate. There have not been any opt-outs. There have not been any problems with that. They're obviously still playing for national championship. Teams like Michigan and teams like that aren't. So, I mean, it is what it is. But, yeah, you got it's funny to see everybody kind of clap back at Kirk Herbstreit. That's why I mentioned that about Boise State and Arizona State. You can fight until you're purple about the seeding, but the committee did not seed the teams. They merely ranked them. And I do think it's fair to where those teams are ranked. Now, of course, the qualifications, ramifications of, being a conference champion, is is very important. But at the same time, you know, if you don't win your conference championship, it's okay. And Penn State's showing that. Ohio State's certainly showing that. Texas is still showing that. And, it's just kind of one of those deals. But again, everybody was able to get the jobs done. And, that's why you play it on the field. The hypotheticals are bullshit. It's hypothetically, I could be the king of the world, but we all know that's not real. So, I mean, why bother yourself going through all these hypotheticals when you just don't know what's going to happen between the white lines?
Yeah. We are going next week to the Orange Bowl, which is the home of Good Dog Beverage. Good Dog offers a variety of products, including vodka and whiskey cocktails, along with bourbon hard seltzers. Your Good Dogs leverage the beverage program. They donate a portion of the profits from every case sold and 100% of the merchandise sales profits to provide service dogs for people in need. You can go to gooddogbeverage.com. That's good, DOGG beverage.com to find merchandise and the closest retailer carrying Good Dog beverages to you.
Well, Kevin, any parting shots before we get into our coverage or content plan for the rest of the next week or so?
No, I'm good. We do have to give kudos to Missouri. The walk-off field goal against a mediocre Iowa Hawkeye team, 8-5, 9-3, or 10-3, completely normal. Needed a walk-off field goal there. So SEC is 1-3, I believe, against the Big Ten in the bowl season this year. Did you see Connor Stallion's tweet last night?
Yes.
And if you haven't, go search that out. Really long tweet. He pays Elon Musk $8 a month, it seems. It kind of goes into the analytics not into the analytics. It kind of just exposes strength of schedule and strength of record. And it's kind of what we've been saying all along is that these strength of schedules and strength of records are based off of these bogus preseason rankings that don't mean anything. They're all based on hypotheticals. Yes. And that's what strength of schedule and strength of record are based off of. It's based off of what 25, 50 random Joes look at on August 10th in the summertime when nothing matters. And then that's what the rest of the season's ranked on. Where was Florida State ranked to start the season? Were they 8, 9, 10? Somewhere in there. They were in the top 10. And then they basically go winless for the rest of the season. So how many people got a boost from the strength of record and strength of schedule from Florida State? And Florida State ends up being lower than hot dog water on the totem pole. Like, the SEC gets the bias in the preseason rankings. The SEC, therefore, has inflated strength of schedules, inflated strength of records. Now, does it not mean that Indiana didn't have a cakewalk of a season? Yeah, they certainly did. But Texas showed you that it just matters to win games. And as long as you go 1-0 each weekend, that's all that matters. Doesn't matter if you're playing FCS 12 times. Well, no, that does matter. But if you're playing the middle to bottom half of your conference versus the top 3 of each conference, like, there's a slight discrepancy there, but Oklahoma's not the top of the SEC. They showed that all season long, and then they showed that in their bowl game. Alabama was 9-3 for a reason. They showed that. They lost to a depleted Michigan defense. Michigan had 3 or 4 starters sitting out, and Jalen Milroe still pooped himself. And if you haven't seen the Connor Stallion's tweet, I encourage you to go seek it out.
100%. And that's the beauty of it. And I think the other thing too is, looking at what Dan Lanning is going over, tying into like the layoffs and stuff like that. Listen, it's the same thing I tell my students. You can there's only so much you can control. You cannot control the teams that you face. You can only control your actions. You can't control where a team is seated, who they play, what they do against those teams. You can only control how you play against them. And Dan Lanning was great after Oregon got bounced. There's no excuse. Some days it's not your day. And That's okay. It's okay to get beat. There have been beatdowns upon beatdowns in playoffs in the NFL and in playoffs everywhere, not just college football or the NFL, but high school football, anything, any realm of sport. But the biggest thing is being accountable for those actions. Not the media saying, "Oh, the layoff sucks," and yeah, the layoff sucks. Like, believe me, that's why we said 3 weeks off is not fun. If anything needs to change, I think the seeding is okay. I think the rankings are okay. Again, the preseason rankings, we talk about that, they're so pointless and they suck. But because again, it goes back to athletics, but the schedule needs to change. You can't have 3 weeks between games. You just can't do it. If you're going to eliminate conference championship games, then okay, I think you do it. And then you know what? It makes more sense that way. Because then what I would do, honestly, cut off conference championship games anyway. If you're good enough by that point, people know who's going to be up there. Make that week the Army-Navy game. Have the Heisman ceremony that same night, that same day. You get a week off, and then boom, you play. Or you play that next week, and listen, and you I think you have to keep the Bulls happy. The Rose Bowl, obviously, I think that should be a national championship game. There's nothing that beats the Rose Bowl. I've been to the Texlayer Bowl, I've been to the Peach Bowl, the Citrus Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl. Nothing will ever top the Rose Bowl. But you got to figure out a way to make it all work. And for me, I would just cut to conference championship game, move Army-Navy to that week, and then you start right then and there. And then if anything, you get a 2-week bye, which is perfect, and then you go right into it. And I think and the only other thing is you have the quarterfinals also, on college campuses.
Yep. I don't know how I am about eliminating conference championship games, but it just seemed that the extra week between the bracket getting announced and then playing the games, I think is a little tough. So
yes,
I think they can move that up a week because I think there was 2 weeks between.
There were, yeah.
So yeah, it was just weird. But then it's weird because you got Christmas and everything like that. It's just
and timing sucks. Like travel logistics now, it's different when you have one bowl game to pay for.
Yep.
Right. Okay, I know I'm going to the Fiesta Bowl. Great. Now you have, for Penn State, for example, conference championship, first round game, Christmas, second round game, quarterfinals, now semifinals.
And as a fan, I was torn on like, what game do I go to? Right? Because I wanted to go to the Big Ten title game, but $700 for flights to Indianapolis and then paying for a hotel, like that's it. I'm not going to be able to go to any playoff game. Do I want to go to the Fiesta Bowl? Big trip, long logistics, way across the country, expensive flights. And I think they're going to win the game. And I want to go to the game with the most meaning. I'm making a gamble by going to the Miami game this weekend. The game in Miami this weekend. Could they win? I mean, anything's possible. They don't have an opponent yet. But then if they make the national title game, like I am going to want to go.
Yeah.
And then it's just the financial toll is certainly something to be cognizant of.
Right. For me, I kind of have to ball on a budget, because of that, because not knowing, like, obviously it sucks. You get more out of it when you're in person. Obviously you get the feel of the game, you get the feel of everything, and you obviously get access to quotes and things like that. And, $700 to fly across the country to Arizona for New Year's isn't great. For me, I'm to avoid higher costs, I'm driving 4 hours from Altoona to Richmond to fly to Miami with Kevin. So, then there's that. Media hotels aren't cheap. Hotels in general around this time of year, these destinations really aren't cheap because they're vacation destinations. Miami is Miami, right? And obviously, the Orange Bowl is the Orange Bowl. The national championship game is absurd ticket wise. Atlanta's at least a better place to get to,
The hub for
travel
Delta.
wise, because it's drivable. So there's that at least. But yeah, I mean, it's just the logistics of all of this, I think, need to be looked at because you're cutting out the average fan that wants to go. Sometimes that bowl trip was when I was starting out. That was my birthday present and Christmas present for my mom. She would pay for my flight to LA or the Fiesta Bowl. Now that I'm an actual adult, it's a little bit different. But logistics matter, and I think they got to take a really good hard look into what makes the most sense for all parties involved, fans included, because you look at some of these day of game ticket prices, and they're significantly cheaper than face value.
Yeah, I'm hoping. I got to look at tickets now and see how the price is trending. I think, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to time it because it's the first time this has happened. So,
right, and it's so new, and there are just so many unknowns, which is the hardest part too. So I mean, it's just how can you kind of navigate these uncharted waters while also coming out financially on top? Because I mean, it's eliminating really a lot of the independent sites, that can't afford to go on their own. Like at least Atlanta, if you can't fly, it's drivable from State College and Altoona. Yeah, it's 10 hours, and it's not always great, but there are plenty of places to stop along the way. And the game's on a Monday, so you can travel on Saturday and Sunday and still get there. Now, the logistics of the Sugar Bowl, right? A game is supposed to be on Wednesday. Penn State's bowl game in the Fiesta Bowl was on a Tuesday. That's on a Wednesday. The next game, there's Orange Bowl's on a Thursday, and the Cotton Bowl is on a Friday. Those aren't easy travel days.
I don't know about you, but I was worried that the Rose Bowl the Orange Bowl and Cotton Bowl were going to get flipped. Right. They delay the Sugar Bowl day. Well, would it be fair? So I was kind of there was a moment there where I was worried that the Orange Bowl was going to get flipped, and then here we are. We just bought our flights last night, and boom! All of a sudden, they're invalid.
Right. Yeah, there's just so many variables, and there's got to be a better way to figure it all out. And of course, there's nobody there that is probably thinking about this. And if they are, kudos. And if not, I wouldn't mind getting paid good money to figure this stuff out to make it cheaper for the average fan. But again, what matters the most is Penn State is ready to go. We will be there, and we'll have 2 live podcasts next week. One from the Quigley Studios in Richmond ahead of the game, and then obviously after the game as well.
Yep, sure will.
For Kevin Quigley, this has been Jarrod Prugar on the Lasching Out Podcast on the Nittany Sports Now Network. We'll catch you again later this week.